Well, that happened. None of us expected that. Every time you try to get into Fujimoto's head to figure out what he's gonna do next, usually the worst thing happens. This is one of those times. You thought the previous chapters were pretty full on. Honestly, I think it's all downhill from here. Because realistically, after this chapter, how do you go back to normal? How do you go back to small, slow, intimate chapters? You don't. This chapter is cataclysmic. It's a turning point. It's so critical to what Denji has always been about, what he's been known for, and I like how it's also a deconstruction of that. And I'll explain what I mean in a moment. Let me just take in what I've seen, and let me just explain it straight from the get-go, right? Sushi, that's what they're eating. Barram rocked up, and he was basically trying to play with Denji's emotions. Like, look, you do this for me, and I'll give you back Nayuta. And we knew this is going to end in a pretty bad, problematic way. Standard. What I don't think any of us expected is the leverage or the length that Barram would actually go through to achieve this. So this has all been set up. I am convinced that Barram, even Fami, the whole purpose of even coming here was to do this. It's not something that has just been done on the fly. Fami's a smart girl, and I think it's about time a lot of people realize that as much as she is goofily coded, she's also incredibly intelligent and incredibly sick. She is a horseman. She is famine. We have to remember and respect her for that. So yes, she's funny, she's goofy, and she does all these weird things. She's also incredibly dangerous, and always has been. So imagine you're Denji, right? The whole place is surrounded by public safety, and Barram's like, you are Nayuta, you have to help us. Logically, his train of thought is accurate. Denji says he'll go and kill all of public safety, which is pretty crazy on its own terms, but makes sense, right? No, not what's happening here. They want Denji to feel unhappy. They want him to feel pain. They want him to feel trauma. They want him to take all of the good in his life so he isn't happy. So the best way to do this, the only point in his life that has ever been good, that he's had control over, that he's protected for so long, is now sitting headless on a plate in front of him. Nayuta's head is on a plate, being served as a sushi dish. That is a lot, and it's going to send him over the edge, right? And that's the purpose. Barram wants whatever reaction Denji's going to have. He wants to break him. He wants that small pocket of chainsawman that can erase things from existence. And it's funny that Denji doesn't even realize that. He's questioning it himself. Chainsaws can't do that. They're made for cutting down trees. But even Barram infers that the potential nature of what chainsaws are have actually been manipulated and erased. And this was a very small idea brought up a long time ago when it comes to what Pochita actually is, and how just having the ability to erase things could mean that Pochita can basically become whatever he wants, whatever tool he wants. Whether it's more important or just straight being like a normal thing, we don't know. But clearly, if Pochita can erase the origins of certain weapons, he can replace it and rewrite it within its own vision so he can hide, so he can do whatever he wants. Pochita is a funny character. It's a funny concept. It's an entirely different conversation that I've talked about already in detail with potential origins. Right now though, irrelevant. There's a lot of things in this chapter that are kind of sneaky, a little bit hidden, a little bit playful, a little bit interesting. So let's start from the beginning. Something that I really love about this chapter is the deconstruction of Denji. So we've always known his character as someone that absolutely adores food. He loves food, all different types of food. And I cannot emphasize the importance of food to him enough, because it is the one thing that keeps him going. It's the one thing that genuinely makes him happy as well. And even in his periods of doubt, destruction, trauma, whatever it may be, food was the one thing that kind of kept him going on where he wanted to be, where he could be, what he wanted to achieve. He came from basically eating rocks to eating jam-filled sandwiches, and you've seen the happiness on his face, and it's something simple, something small, something that's so easy for, everyday people, but for him, it was like heaven. That has value, a ton of it. He wouldn't let anything go to waste. He'd eat everything, and he has kind of a really interesting respect for food, specifically probably because of where he comes from and the value that it has to him. When you see it here, it is gone. It is completely thrown out the window. The respect, the value, the love and appreciation that he has for food is no longer here. And I cannot stress how important I think that actually is. You thought that it was just Nayuta's head that was being taken away from him? No, it's his love for food, especially in traumatizing experiences as well. You're going to associate potentially the implication that Nayuta has been flayed up in sushi pieces and you are currently eating it. This man would never want to touch sushi again. This man would struggle to even eat normal food ever again because of it. Do you see how my interpretation of that could easily be a deconstruction of Denji's character? Not in a bad way, let me make that clear, in a very powerful way. That everything that he's been built up, everything that he's done for himself, everything that he loves and adores is being very carefully, meticulously deconstructed and pulled apart to bring him to his barest. Barham is incredibly smart, and whether he meant to do this or not with food doesn't even matter, because Denji himself has instinctively done it. That's the point. Why do you think Barham's trying to create order, trying to get him to actually eat? The more stock that you put on Barham actually trying to deconstruct Denji's love for food, which is something not a lot of people know, you're taking away a really big lifeline from him, a really big importance to him. And when Denji doesn't have that many important things to take away, you take away what matters, what is consistent. And now I'm kind of questioning the responsibility of Barham. Whose side is he really on? Because it kind of seems like he trips over himself when he mentions the purpose of Chainsaw Man's power, saying that public safety, and us too, for that matter, want just a tiny bit of Chainsaw Man's power, which is erasing. For some reason, the way Barham explains it just seems off. Like he wasn't really prepared to explain the purpose of what Denji's powers are because he doesn't realize it himself. But if we've learned anything from Fujimoto, as well as more importantly Makima, telling Denji the concept of Chainsaw Man, what its potential is, what it's possible of, even what Barham is doing, kind of creates a pseudo contract. It's not something that has to be fulfilled. It's not something that Denji has to adhere to, but it starts to get into his head, explaining something in detail so it's very difficult to navigate around it or to even just overload someone with information that they can't disagree with, because you notice that's the first thing what Denji does. He tries to disagree with it because he thinks that Chainsaw Mans don't have that power. We know that to be false. We know that he can erase things. We know that he can't really perceive it properly from an outside perspective on what actually happened to him. So he is just as confused. He has no answers for this. So all he's getting, and kind of the intelligence of Barham right now, is that he's explained this whole situation in such incredible detail, kind of laid everything out there for him, and Denji can't disagree. Where do you even begin to start to pick apart the problems of what Barham is saying? Everyone's currently scared of Chainsaw Man. He was popular before, but now he's feared, and he's about to be very, very unhappy. And that leads us into this horrifying, shocking revelation of Nayuta's head being on a plate. Of course, everyone is shocked. They don't know what's going on. But the panel that really, really hurts the most is Denji's reaction to it. I don't think we have seen a face made like this before with such intensity. Honestly, horrifying. And I really wish I could just show the panel that I'm talking about, but it's quite literally on the previous page. It is the final face that you see of Denji reacting to Nayuta. It is a scary panel, and you have to imagine just what on earth is going through his mind. If there's ever a common theme when it comes to full armor Chainsaw Man or full armor Pochita, is that they always underestimate him. So if Pochita were to come out to play, if that full armored Chainsaw Man form were to spawn right now, no one in here would be able to stop it. The scariest thing about this, and let me just throw this idea out there, is that Fami is the one, I think, orchestrating this whole deal, because we've never had the opportunity or even the thought of the opportunity of controlling Pochita. Now you think, well, to control Pochita, you have to control Chainsaw Man. True, partially. When Full Armor Chainsaw Man comes out, right, which is more Pochita, if anything, it's an infusion of them both. You get kind of the animalistic, weird behavioral senses of Pochita, but you also get bits and pieces, personality and attitude from Denji. But the implication is that Pochita in that form is living through Denji's dreams and personality. I mention this because Fami herself might be able to control this, and then if there was anyone that could be able to do it, it is her. Fami, for whatever reason, can control primal fears, and if that isn't proof in itself that she can really control things, I don't know what else would. Now admittedly, you're kind of left to question what she's capable of because of guillotine, but with Nayuta's situation, I think the guillotine motif is kind of coming back full circle. I don't want to say she used it, but she is beheaded. I mentioned guillotine because there was properties of guillotine that didn't work properly, so we know there's different ranges, there's different lengths, there's different things that Fami has to do to make sure whatever she's controlling is well equipped. That most likely means, at least for me, that she has to do certain things for herself so it's possible. It usually always comes at some sort of price or cost. Fami is constantly starving, and I related the cost of it to the food that she has to actually intake. Maybe she has to starve herself alongside the devil so it actually works properly. Maybe the longer she starves, the more control that she has. Regardless, controlling primal fear is more than impressive and more of enough to make me convinced that she could easily do it with Full Armored Chainsaw Man or Pochita. Lastly, let's talk about the most important thing, the head itself, because there's a couple of discrepancies, a couple of weird little things that may or may not make this actually Nayuta. It depends. Firstly, let's get out of the way. Fujimoto can make mistakes. He does quite often, and it usually shows up most consistently within his artwork. It entirely depends on how busy he is or how well he's feeling, so it is okay to make mistakes. In a situation like this though, which is very crucial, very vital, do you think he would make a mistake? Because there is no mole on Nayuta's face, and she does have a prominent mole under her left eye. Maybe he just forgot it. Maybe he put it on the wrong side. Maybe it is there, but it's just like a little bit weirdly shown and not as fully drawn out. I don't know. She has a mole, it's under her left eye, it's very apparent, but now I'm thinking back, like, would he put it there on purpose? Because it is noticeable because of a situation like this where it isn't noticeable. Secondly, the face is decayed a lot more than you think, but we don't know the implications of that. You can tell by the lips and the kind of the glassy look that the eyes have, so it's been like this for a while. The reason I mention this is because there is a very high possibility that Control just can't be killed that way, or any of the horsemen can't just be killed that way. I assume a lot of people are going to think that Nayuta is instantly dead because she's been beheaded. Not necessarily. The horsemen operate on a completely different wavelength compared to normal devils. The slightest bit of blood would probably bring her back. Now, you could argue that's cope, and I would agree, it is definitely cope, but we really don't know the consistency and range of what is possible when it comes to injuries. We've seen characters come back from literally nothing. We've seen characters been dead for a long time and still come back. These are horsemen. These are very, very powerful beings. So there is easily flexibility for her survival. I don't think it is as nail in the coffin as people think. Thirdly, and kind of more of the interesting one, running up her cheek is kind of like these two little vein things. Obviously she doesn't have that, and if I were to ask you where do you think it comes from, you probably just can't answer it, because what is it? It's not a blood vessel, it's not something to do with the beheading. It looks randomly kind of put there. It just feels very choicey that Fujimoto would be like, oh look, there's no mole, she's got this weird thing crawling up her face, her head's kind of decayed so her lips are fully dry and her eyes are glassed over. What has happened? I've seen a lot of people mention mimics and how this little thing kind of looks like an octopus. I think that's more cope than what I was saying about Nayuta surviving, but I kind of like the idea. I don't really have much of a convincing argument for that to be possible. We haven't really seen Yoshida do any sort of mimic stuff. However, it might not be Yoshida. Regardless of how we actually get to the point of faking this, it does work in their favor. You still get the exact same response from Denji. Even if this head were to disintegrate into sand, or it was actually someone else's head this whole time, and Fami or someone else that they're working with were able to reproduce this just without the qualities of her human self, you still get the same effect. Denji still goes out of control, it's still just as powerful. Also, you don't get rid of a really strong asset. This only works once, that's the thing. But if Nayuta's still alive, or they bring her back, it can constantly be used. Now, Barham is a very smart person. Would he sacrifice Nayuta, kill her off completely, just to use this one situation? Yes, he would. But is he smart enough to also realize that he can constantly use Nayuta if she is actually alive? So whether this is a mimic or a fake head, or he intends to bring her back, it is a constant repeating cycle of trauma for Denji, not just a one and done thing. You know what I think? I think Fami is starving Nayuta and is basically controlling her. That is part of her ability. You control Nayuta, continue to use her, continue to keep her alive. You then control Denji, and you can bring out Chainsaw full armor form, full armor Pochita, whatever, whenever you want. When you think about this, it works really well with the whole food and starvation motif. It makes sense. She is the one doing this with Nayuta, and we already know that she's asked for her help before. Now she might have just forcefully taken it. This means that Nayuta is technically not dead, but will be under the control of Fami. And when you look at the bigger picture, we know that Chainsaw Man, full armor form, has versed all the four horsemen before. We may be going to that point again, that Denji, Chainsaw Man, will have to fight everyone to get everything he wants back. And while they're not all cooperating with each other, they're all gunning for him in some way. How does he come out from this? How does he stop this? How does he not only save Nayuta, but also himself? Think about that for a little bit.